Have you ever felt that sinking feeling in your stomach, knowing someone you care about is holding something back? Not a criminal, not a suspect in a high-stakes case, but maybe a child, a spouse, a friend. You know there's a truth trapped behind their teeth, but the harder you push, the more the door slams shut. Now, imagine a different scene. A cold, sterile room. A man suspected of espionage has been silent for 5 straight hours. The professionals have thrown everything at him. Nothing. Then, a senior FBI agent walks in, sits down, and quietly says just 3 words. 20 minutes later, the whole story comes spilling out. Not with a bang, but with a sigh of relief. What were those 3 words? They weren't a threat. They weren't a promise. They were a mirror. Today, I'm going to pull back the curtain on that exact psychological technique. It's a tool so powerful it can coax confessions from hardened spies, but so simple you can use it to understand what's really going on with your own grandchild. And it all starts by repeating the last 2 or 3 words someone says to you. It sounds absurdly simple, doesn't it? Almost insulting. But in the world I come from, the simplest keys open the heaviest doors. This technique is called mirroring. A legend in the FBI. A man named Chris Voss, who negotiated with the world's most dangerous people for a living, called this one of his most potent assets. Let's say a suspect, we'll call him Jimmy, is in the box. He's suspected of a string of small-time burglaries. He's twitchy, hence the nickname some of the boys gave him, Jimmy the Jitterbug. He says, "Look, I don't know anything. I was just at home." The amateur detective slams the table. "You're lying." The professional leans forward, voice calm, and just says, "At home." He's mirroring the last 2 words. Jimmy, caught off guard by the lack of aggression, now has to fill the silence. "Yeah," he says, "at home. Mostly. Then I got a call and had to step out for a bit." The agent mirrors again. "For a bit. And now the dam starts to crack. Yeah, you know, my cousin needed a ride. He's always in some kind of trouble." You see what's happening? The agent isn't accusing. He isn't even asking questions. He's using Jimmy's own words to create a vacuum that Jimmy himself feels compelled to fill. The psychology here is fundamental. We are social creatures, wired for connection. When someone repeats our words, it sends a powerful subconscious signal. I am listening. I understand. I am with you. It triggers what scientists call mirror neurons. These are the circuits in your brain that fire not just when you perform an action, but when you see someone else perform that same action. It's why you flinch when you see an athlete get injured, or why you might find yourself smiling just because someone smiled at you. Mirroring someone's words is a verbal version of that. It creates an echo, a sense of familiarity, and rapport that lowers psychological defenses. The person feels so deeply understood that the anxiety of holding back the truth becomes more painful than the act of telling it. Have you ever been in a conversation where you felt someone wasn't just hearing you, but was truly on your wavelength? Chances are, they were using a form of this without even knowing it. It's a powerful, almost primal, form of validation. So, mirroring makes people feel heard. That's the foundation. But the professionals, the ones who do this for a living, don't just stop there. They layer this technique inside a much larger, more strategic framework. In law enforcement, one of the most well-known is the Reed technique. The basics are simple. You start with non-threatening, factual questions to establish a baseline. And then you begin to introduce a theme of moral justification for why the person might have done what they did. You're not excusing the act, but you're giving them a more palatable story to tell themselves. Maybe you were just trying to provide for your family. Perhaps you were under a lot of pressure and just made a bad call. You were just following orders, weren't you? And right here is where mirroring becomes the master key. When the suspect bites on one of those themes, you use mirroring to draw them deeper into that narrative. Suspect, I guess I was under a lot of pressure. Agent, a lot of pressure. Boom. You're no longer fighting them, you're exploring their chosen reason together. But let me tell you about an insight that isn't in the training manuals. Everyone in an interrogation room is building an alibi. But there are 2 kinds. The first is the factual alibi, where you were, what you did, who you saw. That's what amateurs focus on. The professional looks for the emotional alibi. This is the story the suspect tells themselves about how they felt. It's their justification for their state of mind. I had a case once. A woman named Margaret, whose business suspiciously burned to the ground right after she doubled the insurance policy. Her factual alibi was perfect. Receipts, witnesses, phone records all accounted for. But her emotional alibi was a mess. She spoke about the fire with this flat, rehearsed sadness. She'd say, "It was such a devastating loss." I sat with her for an hour, just letting her talk. Then I mirrored her. "A devastating loss?" I said it softly, with the same hollow tone she used. Her composure cracked, not all at once, but a flicker in her eyes. The mask slipped. We weren't talking about the facts anymore, we were talking about her feelings. Over the next hour, by gently mirroring her emotional language, it must have been overwhelming. Became overwhelming. The carefully constructed wall of her emotional alibi crumbled. She confessed she'd hired someone to do it. She couldn't maintain the lie about the facts once the lie about her feelings was exposed. This works because our emotions are much harder to counterfeit than our actions. The brain is dedicating enormous resources to maintaining a lie, both factual and emotional. By mirroring, especially their emotional language, you're essentially forcing their brain to process that emotion again, but through the validating lens of a listener. It increases the cognitive load. They have to keep the lie straight and process this feeling of being understood, and eventually, something has to give. It's a subtle form of psychological pressure that feels like empathy. Think about your own life. When you're trying to hide your true feelings, maybe you're disappointed, but pretending to be happy. How exhausting is it? Now imagine someone looks you in the eye and gently says, "You seem a little disappointed." How much harder does it become to keep up the facade? That's the principle at work. Are you more likely to protect the facts of a situation, or the story you tell yourself about how you feel? Now, a master interrogator isn't just listening with their ears, they're listening with their eyes. The human body cannot lie as proficiently as the human mouth. While a suspect is busy constructing their alibi, their body is broadcasting the truth in high definition. Knowing when to deploy a mirror is just as important as knowing how. And the body gives you the cues. These are what we call ventilating behaviors, actions the body takes to release pent-up stress and anxiety. It's the suspect who suddenly starts adjusting their shirt collar as if it's too tight. It's the person who keeps rubbing the back of their neck, or touching their hair, or fiddling with a pen. These aren't proof of a lie, but they are indicators of discomfort. They are a flashing yellow light that says, "What I am talking about right now is causing me stress." And that is the perfect moment to deploy a mirror. When you see that physical tell, you know the last thing they said is connected to the source of their anxiety. Mirroring it focuses the pressure right on that weak point. I remember a case involving a chief financial officer, a polished man we'll call Mr. Sterling, suspected of embezzling millions from his company. He was cool as a cucumber, sat in the chair, perfect posture, hands calmly folded on the table. He answered every question with unnerving poise. For 2 hours, he gave us nothing. But I wasn't watching his face, I was watching his feet. Underneath the table, both of his feet were pointed directly at the door. Not casually, but rigidly, like a sprinter in the starting blocks. In my line of work, that's a billboard that screams, "I wanted a bolt." While his upper body was performing a play called "I Am Calm," his lower body was preparing for escape. That's where the real conversation was. At one point, he was calmly explaining a complex financial transaction, and as he said the words, "A standard wire transfer," I saw his ankle twitch. That was it. That was the tell. I waited for him to finish the sentence, then leaned in and said, softly, "A standard wire transfer?" His composure didn't break, but a bead of sweat traced a path down his temple. His body had betrayed him. We kept mirroring around the details of those transfers, and every time we did, the ventilating behaviors, a slight cough, an adjusting of his tie became more pronounced. His body was confessing long before he did. These tells can be even smaller. We talk about micro-expressions, flashes of true emotion that last less than a fraction of a second. A flicker of fear, a ghost of a smirk, a flash of guilt. They're nearly impossible to control. Seeing them requires practice. But when you pair the observation of a micro-expression with an immediate verbal mirror, the effect is profound. You are essentially telling the person, "I see the truth you're trying to hide." It's unnerving for them because it feels like you're reading their mind. So, here's a question for you. The next time you're in a conversation that feels tense, stop listening to the words for a moment. What are their hands doing? Where are their feet pointing? Are they trying to create a barrier with a coffee cup or a folder? The body tells a story all its own, and it's your job to read it. All right, let's put this all together into a practical tool you can use. But first, a word of caution. This is not a toy. It's not a party trick to manipulate your friends or win arguments. Using this unethically will destroy trust faster than a lit match in a gas station. Its true power lies in its ability to foster understanding, to help someone unburden themselves, to get to a truth that needs to be heard for their own good or for the good of others. Its proper use is in negotiation, in difficult family conversations, in interviews, and yes, in the interrogation room, but always with a foundation of respect. Here's the method, simple and clean. First, you listen. And I mean truly listen, not with the intent to reply, not to judge, not to solve, but to understand. Pay attention to their words, their tone, and as we just discussed, their body. Second, you mirror. Pick the last 2 or 3 words, or the 1 to 3 words that carry the most emotional weight, and repeat them back as a question. Third, and this is the part where everyone fails, you go silent. This is my most crucial piece of advice. The silence is the canvas upon which they will paint the truth. An amateur rushes to fill the silence because it feels awkward. A professional embraces it. Let them sit with the echo of their own words. The urge to fill that void will be overwhelming for them, and they will fill it with information you need. Let the silence do the work. Fourth, you repeat as needed. You can layer empathy on top of it. A nod, a soft facial expression. You are a guide, helping them navigate their own thoughts. I once used this not on a suspect, but on a friend's teenage son. The boy was withdrawn. His grades were slipping, and he wouldn't talk to anyone. His parents were frantic. I sat with him for a while, and he just gave me one-word answers. Finally, he mumbled, "I just wish things at school were different." I didn't ask him why. I didn't offer advice. I just looked at him and said, softly, "We're different?" He was quiet for a long moment. I let the silence hang in the air. Then he took a breath and said, "Yeah, this kid on my bus, he just won't leave me alone." I mirrored again. "Leave you alone?" And for the next 30 minutes, the whole story of a bully came pouring out. We weren't in an interrogation room. We were in a living room. And the tool worked because it was about extracting a confession. It was about creating a safe space to tell the truth. How many times have you rushed to offer a solution when what the person really needed was the silence to find their own? So, the biggest mistake is over-mirroring until you sound like a parrot, or ignoring the body language that gives you the cue. The second biggest mistake is fearing the pause. Use it sparingly. Use it strategically, and use it with good intent. It's a key, not a weapon. And speaking of keys, there are other ways to instantly read a room. Next week, we're going to discuss the one single body language signal that FBI agents rely on above all others to spot a lie in seconds. It's not in the eyes, and it's not in the hands. You'll be surprised. Subscribe so you don't miss these hidden secrets from my world. And leave a comment below if you were in that interrogation room, facing that silence. What truth do you think you'd be most afraid to tell?